Today on Inspired Money.
So I jumped out of the truck and I started making my way towards it. And about 20 or 30 meters from the original IED, a secondary device that hadn't yet been detected detonated right under me. That sent me into the air and onto my knees and elbows. I was still conscious, but the lights had gone completely out. I couldn't see a thing. No shadows, nothing.
This is episode 114 with veteran and entrepreneur Aaron Hale. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. You are in for a great Inspired Money episode today. Our guest, Aaron Hale, he's a chef, a patriot, a veteran. I think that it's safe to say that he's like no other entrepreneur that we've had on the show. He may also have 9 lives, and as you're about to hear, he's used a couple of them already. A shout out to Pete Turner, our guest from episode 102, who recommended having Aaron on the show. If you remember, Pete was an Army spy, and Aaron was in the Army too, as an E.O.D specialist. That stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. That's the military's bomb squad. These are the brave people who defuse improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. In this episode, you'll learn Aaron's changing values and sense of duty while serving in the military, the concept of the E.O.D toolkit, and making the best of the tools in your toolbox. And this is a real-life example of living with perseverance, resilience, and gratitude. I hope that Aaron's story will give you perspective like it did for me. Now let's get inspired with Aaron Hale. Aaron, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andy. It's an honor to be invited.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I remember getting a story told to me by my father about my great-grandfather, Amos, who used to pair old discarded combat boots from World War II. He'd polish them up, clean them up, relace them, and find matching boots, and then sell them off. This was when he was just a kid to help put food on the table for his family. You know, when I was just a kid, I tried my first entrepreneurial endeavor, maybe not quite as noble as my great-grandfather's, but in school, I'd like to chew bubble gum, which was, of course, contraband, but I'd have a few packs in my pocket, and every once in a while, a friend of mine would say, hey, I'll give you $0.25 for a piece, and something in my head just clicked. It was like blood in the water for a shark. I thought, wait a second, there's money to be made here. And I go into the grocery store with my mom. I would see these sleeves of bubblegum packs that were 5, 6, 8 packs long, and only for $1. And I did the math. That's like a 700% margin. So I borrowed a couple bucks from my mom. She was my first business partner. Dump all these packs out into a baggie and go to school and start selling piece by piece with the bubble gum I just bought from the grocery store. And that was my first entrepreneurial endeavor.
Wow. So that capitalist and entrepreneur in you did start pretty early.
I had a lot of big dreams. I wanted to do a lot of things, and having stuff and going and doing things often costs money. And my family, though we weren't poor, we weren't very completely affluent. So many of the things I wanted to do or wanted to buy, I'd have to do it out of pocket. It was a thrill for me, is that creating this value that others would pay for. I guess maybe that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit, is the thrill of doing something that will eventually, hopefully, make you money.
I understand that you were a very capable kid growing up, but you lacked ambition and direction. How is it that you ended up in the Navy?
I did, enjoy my life. I was comfortable growing up in Akron, Ohio, and though I had a lot of interests, I didn't have a whole lot of goals, not a lot of discipline. And I went to college. I decided on business as a major only because it seemed so general. I didn't really have a direction. So after about 3 semesters and 50 pounds, that freshman 50, I realized that I was just burning up my tuition and not going anywhere. I was just spinning my wheels. So I left. I got my act together. I lost that beer weight, and I started looking for ways to just kind of find a new course. And of course, I need to earn back some of that tuition, and I could do that through the GI Bill. My whole family has a creative, an artistic gene, so to speak. My mom is a terrific sketch and paint artist. My creativity led me into the kitchen, and I'd been cooking since I could reach over the counter. And it just was natural that when joining the military and trying to get that GI Bill money, I would join as a Navy cook. And at the same time, I would get to tour the world and kind of feed that wanderlust of mine as well. That's how I came to join the military.
It sounds like you had, and I think it was an 8-year run that sounds pretty enviable. I think most listeners would say that sounds like a really good career.
The on-duty and off-duty opportunities that I had with the Navy were incredible. Right out of basic training and my technical school, where they sent me to learn how to cook, I was sent over to Italy, where I spent 4 years, both on shore duty and aboard the flagship for the commander of the U.S. Sixth Fleet. And for those 4 years, I would work hard to do my best as a sailor and as a chef, and on my off-duty time, I would just hang up my uniform and go become an Italian, learn the customs, the culture, the language, go tour Europe. Even on my on-duty time, while I was serving on board the ship didn't do those 6-month cruises like the carrier groups did. The flagship would maybe do a month out to sea, but it would pull into 3 or 4 different ports around the Mediterranean, run up the flag, throw a reception for the local dignitaries, and then head right back to Gaeta, Italy, where it was home ported. I got to share in some amazing experiences. It's definitely an adventure. However, 2004, my time in Italy was coming to an end, but both wars were in full swing, and there was something about being in the service. I joined in a time of peace, but then very quickly it became a time of war, and then my mindset, my values changed over time. It was less a selfish endeavor for the GI Bill or the discipline. I'd reached those goals and I'd become more disciplined, but then I gained a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility, a certain level of pride for being in the service, and I wanted to do more. And I volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan. And this time, instead of cooking for 25, 35 of the admiral's staff and the admiral himself, I was cooking for 500, 600, 700 NATO troops, U.S., Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, all over in Afghanistan. It was pretty funny. I'd learned Italian, then had to go to Afghanistan to try to speak it. But it was definitely a different experience.
Aaron, did you find that shift moving away from Italy to Afghanistan, did you feel a greater fulfillment in having a bigger impact?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have learned over the years that the selfish endeavors, while sometimes giving you immediate gratification, aren't fulfilling. The endeavors you do to benefit others, to give others value, to make others happy, are what really are the most fulfilling, would make me happiest. So, me making money or me learning a new skill or something, it does benefit me, and that does make me a better me. But then if I can put those skills or that money to use, to work in the assistance of others, that's what makes me happy. And, volunteering to go out to Afghanistan, serve the troops, I felt even better about using my skills than I did cooking for the ad room.
Interesting. And I understand that it was around this time that you met some E.O.D techs.
One day, I ran into some E.O.D techs while they were doing preventive maintenance on their equipment. And E.O.D is Explosive Ordnance Disposal. That's the military's bomb squad. And they're the ones that clean up or mitigate the dangers in the roadside bombs, the car bombs, suicide bombs, anything, all the IEDs out there, anything that explodes from bullets to nuclear bombs. That's E.O.D's wheelhouse. And these guys they had emptied out their truck, and it's like a yard sale of cool guy gear from bomb suits, the robots, and everything in between. And so I stopped and started talking to these guys and struck up this conversation about what their job entails. And I was instantly drawn to the technical aspect, the tight-knit community, the brotherhood, and of course, the fact that they're first responders on the battlefield. They're the ones that go to save lives, and everything about it. It had me hooked. And when my tour was up, my contract was actually nearing an end. And I decided, the Navy has E.O.D. Every branch has E.O.D. technicians. Only the Navy didn't want to let me go from the cooking field. My rank was undermanned, and I was kind of stuck. So when my contract came to an end, I let it expire, and I walked over to the Army recruiter, handed him my paperwork, and basically switched uniforms. I went from blue to green. And soon thereafter, I was learning how to be a soldier and learning how to be an E.O.D technician. And the pace was very quick. The school was technically very, very stressful, very difficult. But soon thereafter, I was at my first duty station and on my way to Iraq for my first deployment as a E.O.D team sergeant.
Aaron, I'm not a military guy. Is it very uncommon for someone to make that drastic a change?
Well, it's not unheard of to switch branches. I don't know of many cooks going into the bomb squad, but yeah, it happens all the time. I've known quite a few service members that have switched over from Marines to Air Force or Navy to Army and vice versa. It happens all the time.
But not from kitchen to battlefield.
That also happens, probably a little more rare.
Tell us about the training. I understand it's pretty arduous.
Just to be accepted into the school, each candidate for the E.O.D school must undergo a chemical suit, a mop suit test, and a bomb suit test, which is essentially like a physical fitness test while in the bomb suit. But you also are tested on your mental acuity in the meantime. So they physically exhaust you and then find out if you can still think under that kind of pressure. So it's often, carrying around 100-pound, iron rounds in a bomb suit, then like a 155 millimeter shell, and then doing jumping jacks and flutter kicks, and then they ask you to read an article in a newspaper and run the track for a mile or so, and come back and ask you details on that article you just read. That's just to get into the school. And then for about a year, taught everything from how to read certain Cyrillic nomenclature on Russian ammunition to how to defuse rockets and all sorts of things. So yeah, there's the schoolhouse. Each student is tested on their material on average about every 2 or 3 days.
That sounds crazy. Did you love it while you were there? Any regrets? It's like, oh, I want to make an impact, but I kind of miss the kitchen.
Absolutely none. I was loving every minute of it. It was difficult, but the one thing that the military really opened my eyes to, so to speak, is that the most rewarding things are often the most difficult. Nothing worthwhile in this world comes to us easy, and this was a tough job. The attrition rate for the schoolhouse is pretty high, but even those tests, a failing score is an 85. We don't want C students working on IEDs. So you get the best of the best working on the battlefield, saving lives. And I wanted to be one among those.
So what was your first tour like?
My first deployment as an E.O.D technician, I was. I'd gotten to keep my rank from the Navy, so I went from petty officer to sergeant. And, they'd placed me in the counter explosives exploitation cell, which they shortened to SEXY. It was a collection point for evidence rounded up off the battlefield. So E.O.D teams would work on these IEDs, and they'd collect as much evidence as they safely could from the IEDs they'd rendered safe, from tape and wire to samples of the explosive, and they would send it to me, and I would do the triage on them, and I'd separate all these different components, lift fingerprints, and things like that, and send them off to the different divisions of the SEXY cell, like chemical analysis, biometrics, electronics. It was an amazing experience as far as learning-wise, because when I became a team leader myself, I knew what they were looking for as far as evidence collection was going for. And the reason we do this is because this evidence, this information would go to representatives. It would go to the FBI, CIA, ATF, DIA. And this information was disseminated throughout the battle space and back to DC. So we knew who we were fighting and how to get to them before the explosion. So
it sounds like you're part bomb tech, part CSI.
Well, we tried our hardest to do everything we could to keep what we call left of the boom. If you think of a timeline, the right of the boom is the messy part. Left of the boom is where you've got the bomb placer, the bomb maker, the bomb financer, and we wanted to get to those guys first.
Right. And if you can collect evidence and analyze that so that you can track down where it originated from, you can go to the source.
Right. Every little bit. In fact, the bomb makers, they have a certain signature. They, 3 twists on a wire or certain color tape. So when working with explosives, you find one way that works. You don't want to experiment anymore. Just do it the way it works. And we found the more evidence we collected, we could find sometimes migration patterns of these guys if they were getting squeezed out of one area into another. The science behind it and and the intelligence side of it was we kept it very detailed.
Take us back to 2011. It's your second tour in Afghanistan. You were, I think, 8 months into your 12-month time there, and you were home for R&R.
Yeah, this was my third deployment, second to Afghanistan, and it was mid-November, and I'd just gotten back onto the battlefield from my 2 weeks of R&R back home, and I got to see my son turn 1. I got to spend Thanksgiving with the family, which is one of my favorite times of the year. You get to it's an excuse to bring the whole family for a reunion, and of course it's an excuse to eat like a glutton. But I was back on the battlefield. My team had picked me up from the airfield in our armored truck, and we were heading back out to our command outpost, where our area of operation. And I'd just thrown the luggage on top of the robot in the back, and I was heading back to work. Along the way, the convoy commander called back to say they'd located an IED on the side of the road and wanted to know if we could get to work. And of course, no time like the present. So I tossed my luggage off the robot, tossed the robot out of the truck, and we got to work. The robot found what we were expecting. Almost everything we found in that time in that area were pressure plate IEDs, like a 5-liter jug, originally containing vegetable oil, now had explosive in it, homemade explosive, connected by a lamp cord to a 9-volt battery and a plywood pressure plate. So we're very used to this IED. It's technologically almost as simple as you can get. The robot was able to get the pressure plate separated from the device, so the trigger was gone, but it couldn't get the bulk explosive out of the hard packed dirt. And like I said, I wanted to get as much evidence as I safely could. So I jumped out of the truck and I started making my way towards it. And about 20 or 30 meters from the original IED, a secondary device that hadn't yet been detected detonated right under me. That sent me into the air and onto my knees and elbows. I was still conscious, but the lights had gone completely out. I couldn't see a thing. No shadows, nothing. It was completely dark. I thought my helmet had gotten pushed over the top of my head, over my face. But I first wanted to do the systems check, make sure there was no arterial bleeding or anything. So I wiggled fingers and toes and knees and elbows and found that I was more or less still intact. So I reached up to fix my helmet just to find that it was gone. And I thought to myself, oh no, this is really bad. The Army is going to want that back. My teammates rushed in to drag me out of the blast zone. And within 48 hours, I was in Walter Reed.
And you were blind.
And I was blind. The bomb blew up both my eardrums. It cracked my skull to the point where I was leaking spinal fluid. And it had damaged both my eyes to the point where I'd never see again. It was it's kind of a surreal moment, realizing that after a few surgeries that there was nothing that could be done, and I'd be blind forever. Those what ifs, why me's trying to creep in, but my support system, my family, and frankly the military training wouldn't let me feel sorry for myself for a minute, and I just kind of assess my situation, collect myself, and try to do the best with what I still had. In fact, I use the analogy of the deployment to Afghanistan, where E.O.D teams have so many different tools, from the bomb suits and the robots and everything else, power tools, and you name it. We could fill a shipping container for every team, and we do. For every team that goes onto deployment, a shipping container follows them. But when we get to the battlefield, we're given this armored truck, and we got to decide then the most important things, the tools that we're going to need, and we try to jam every corner of that truck full of as many tools as we can, but we have to leave some behind. And then, of course, in places like Afghanistan, where we were working, most of our patrols were on goat trails. Couldn't support a vehicle of any size, so we were on foot. And now we have to decide what kind of tools we can fit. What's the most important that we can then carry on our backs? And in a rucksacks besides, carrying MREs and water and extra socks and ammunition, maybe a couple pounds of C4, a rope and a grappling hook, a carabiner. And we were doing the same job with so many fewer tools. So I looked at my time in Walter Reed and, to now, okay, so I'm short a few tools, but I'm still a soldier, I'm still a father, still a husband, son. I'm still, supposed to be a leader, an example. So I can't waste time with self-pity. I got to get to work.
Coming up, Aaron pushes his limits by climbing mountains and running marathons until he gets hit with another massive setback. And then there's a business in his future. All that and more right after this short break. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/114. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Aaron or other things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Did you know that in 2011, hedge fund manager Kyle Bass reportedly bought $1 million worth of nickels? Kyle's founder of Heyman Capital Management LP in Dallas, and he successfully predicted and bet against the U.S. subprime mortgage crisis, making him a lot of money and a name for himself when the real estate bubble burst. So why would anyone want to own 20 million nickels? A United States nickel is made with 75% copper and 25% nickel. In 2011, a nickel contained more than 5 cents worth of metal. If you included the cost of labor and manufacturing, it was costing more than 5 cents to make a nickel. In other words, the United States was losing money on every nickel minted. Bass calculated that the metal content of a nickel was actually worth 6.8 cents, meaning that $1 million worth of nickels was actually worth 1.36 million in base metals. By his analysis, there was no downside because he could always redeposit his nickels for the original cost of $1 million. I've read several articles that mention that storing that many nickels would actually have a carrying cost. The size and weight is significant, so you'd likely have to pay a facility to store them. There's another problem, which is even greater. It's illegal to melt United States nickels and pennies, although Bass probably assumed that he could sell them to someone who was willing to illegally melt the coins into bullion. Thanks to the internet, where you can find just about anything, there's a U.S. nickel melt value calculator. I plugged in the numbers, and both nickel and copper prices have declined since 2011. According to the calculator, a nickel's total metal value today is worth just a little over 4 cents. So you probably should not go out and buy a large quantity of nickels, and definitely don't melt them, because that's illegal. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. What do you like most about Inspired Money? Do you have a favorite episode? Is there someone you'd like me to invite on the show? If so, go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy and shoot me an email. Or tweet me at RunnymedeCap. That's RUNNYMEDECAP. I'd love to hear from you. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong.
I love the idea of learning how to use the right tools in your kit and being resourceful. And it sounds like you had lost your sense of sight, but being resourceful, you started doing Google searches on what can a blind person still accomplish.
That was, Walter Reed, the doctors of Walter Reed really couldn't do much for me. They're the service members that have been injured and they spend months there are usually the ones that have to go through extensive physical therapy and have prosthetics they need to learn how to use. For me, I lost my eyes. So they patched me up, and within a few weeks, I was out of there. But then I was sent to the VA's Blind Rehabilitation Center in Augusta, Georgia, where they would then teach me how to use the cane, the accessibility devices like barcode scanners and talking phones and computers, so I could, navigate my world. And as soon as I could use my phone, I started Googling blind plus outdoors, blind plus running, whatever I could. Like, I wanted to figure out how I could still do the things I wanted to do and find solutions. And a few names kept coming up, like Eric Weinmeier is the first blind person to climb, the only blind person to climb Mount Everest. And I realized that, even though I'm blind, my life wasn't over. If these guys could be doing stuff like that, I could stay off my butt. And I was terrified of being stuck on the couch, popping pills, and possibly going down that spiral that would lead to becoming one of the 22 we lose each day. So I wanted to climb mountains. And I got a hold of Eric, and I climbed a mountain with him. And then I found Lonnie Bedwell, who is the first blind person to kayak the Grand Canyon. I went kayaking with him. And in getting ready and staying fit for and being prepared for climbing mountains, I started running, because in Florida, it's kind of hard to find a mountain to practice on. So I would start running, and before I'd ever run my first marathon, I'd somehow gotten myself signed up for 4 marathons in 4 months, and 3 of which qualified me for Boston. So I might have been overcompensating, but I didn't want to be stuck indoors.
You were accomplishing incredible things. Was there any thought at this time about how can you make money or turn this into something that you can do as an occupation? Or was it just pushing yourself to see what you were capable of?
Well, like I said, first it was the challenge of pushing myself past where I was comfortable. One of the examples is with the kayaking. I had to learn how to kayak, and one of my instructors, first thing he said is, you're gonna have to get comfortable being upside down in this boat, being underwater. Because when you think, you see one of those guys do those Eskimo rolls. Gosh, I hope I don't have to do that. I just want to kayak. I want to stay upright. But especially when you're new, you're going to be upside down a lot. Don't panic, because that's the worst thing you can do. So I had to be uncomfortable with the most uncomfortable part of the kayaking, being upside down with your head in the water. After getting better with the running, with the mountain climbing, with the kayaking, it became less about me again. And I found that people, like the marathon training, I had a running group, and I would just ask people to help me train for my marathons by guiding me. And what happened was we started doing a Sunday long run, and each Sunday more people would show up. And then it became less of Aaron's long run day, and it became the group long run day. Other people were accomplishing their goals of running maybe their first 5K, and it wasn't about me. And it became such a better feeling that we were all doing this as a group, as a community. And in the meantime, I became an instructor at the E.O.D school. I started public speaking and telling my story. And if I could share my knowledge, my experiences, that there's a light beyond, the hardship, that there's strength after struggle, that again was the more fulfilling part. It wasn't just about me conquering my challenges, but it was me bringing, the wisdom of having endured the hardship back to others and saying, you can do this too.
Okay, so you were an instructor, you're inspiring and teaching other people, reached a peak in 2014 running the Boston Marathon. That would be huge for anyone, but I think that given your path, even more significant. But your story of setbacks doesn't stop there.
Yeah. After the 2014 Boston Marathon, I continued to push the limits of, what I thought I could do. I kept climbing and kayaking. I went hunting for the first time since losing my eyesight, and all sorts of things. But 2 weeks before, and flying to Africa to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, my first of my attempt to climb the 7 summits, I contracted bacterial meningitis. And of course, it was right through the cracks in my skull that either hadn't been completely patched up in the original surgeries or maybe reopened, who knows. But I was right back in the hospital, and even closer to death than the IED blast injury. Whether it was through the heavy doses of antibiotics or the meningitis itself, it was stealing what was left of my hearing that the blast hadn't taken. And I was in the doctor's office when he broke the news. Aaron, you're gonna be completely deaf. And I was devastated. I said, "What? No, really? What? What did he say?" It was within 2 weeks. I was in complete darkness and complete silence. It's a terribly isolating, terribly lonely place to be. It was awful. Just thinking about it is a horrible feeling.
What goes through your mind when you cannot see and you cannot hear?
Of course, those demons try to come in. The what ifs, the why me's. When have I paid my dues? When has this soldier sacrificed enough? And that's that terrible spiral that if I'd followed it down, I wouldn't have been able to recover. But I had a beautiful, wonderful girlfriend who's now my wife, and nursed me back to health. My mom and my sister came in, but my girlfriend moved in. She left her occupation and her home to nurse me back to health. And she begun writing every single letter of every word that she or anybody else needed to communicate to me in the palm of my hand. And that was the only way I could get messages in. It was at this time that I thought maybe I should have tried to learn Braille. But with all the technology, it's a dying art. It's the one thing. I think the moment that really turned around for me was that it was Thanksgiving time again. The holidays were coming, and I just I wasn't going to let myself feel sorry for my situation. I was going to go back to. I was going to turn cooking into a therapy, and I was going to just throw myself into preparing the best feast I could for all the family that was going to come and our neighbors and friends. We decided it was going to be a celebration of just being alive, surviving twice. And I started cooking weeks in advance. I started to prepare desserts. The spread was going to be huge. I started making cakes and cookies and pies, and I started batch after batch of fudge. I was making all sorts of different flavors, and every time I would try a new combination of just spices, I was taking alcohol and dumping it in there. This is going to be awesome. And eventually, it turned out I was having a great time. My wife said she noticed something on my face that she hadn't seen in 6 months, and that was a smile on my face. But she also noticed that the fudge was piling up. So she was sneaking it out the front door, and I say sneaking like you have to be real stealthy around a blind deaf guy. But she was giving it away, and people were coming back. Friends and neighbors were saying, "That was terrific. Can we buy more of it for our baby shower or birthday party?" And well, the capitalist in me said, "Why, of course you may." And that's when E.O.D. fudge, or Extraordinary Delights, was born. And it quickly took off. We soon found that we were getting more orders than just me and our humble home kitchen could satisfy. So we found a commercial kitchen. We started to expand. We built a website around it, and we became online retailers of fudge and other confections.
I understand that you've received big orders from corporations like Boeing and individuals from across the country. Your desire to continue self-improvement didn't stop with marathons and rafting and rock climbing. With your business, you and your now wife, McKayla, you've gone to school to study chocolate making and things like that.
I had to put my money where my mouth was, so to speak. I've been preaching for years now that the right tools in the kit, so I was missing a few more tools, but I couldn't let that stop me. So I'd also the meningitis, but when it took my hearing, it also took my inner ear balance, so I couldn't even walk at the beginning. But I got on my treadmill and I held on to the stability bar with the iron grip, and I started walking. And then I was jogging, and then I was running again. And eventually, I'd signed up about a year and a half later for my first comeback marathon, which happened to be my hometown, Akron marathon, and it was also my 20th high school reunion. So my comeback to health. It was the most perfect timing, and I qualified for Boston again. But going to school was chocolate school to become the best at our latest endeavor of making chocolate. And we wanted to, if we were going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to build this business, and we're going to have the absolute best quality fudge, chocolates, and other confections, because it was all about what we would want to have ourselves. We want to serve our customers. So if you're going to do it, be the best at it.
Well, you started with the fudge, but now you're diversifying into other lines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We recently added our first piece of merchandise, which was our T-shirt with my favorite saying, "Challenge accepted," on it. And then we've taken our some of the proceeds from the business to start an entirely new endeavor, real estate investing. So we're recently newly minted landlords. We want to make sure that even if we don't show up to work 1 or 2 days, God forbid, there's another emergency, that the family's still taken care of, that the business runs, that our investments still work for us, and then our efforts go to benefit others. So a portion of our proceeds do go to other veteran service organizations that are nearest to our heart.
I love that. And we are beneficiaries with the fudge, and I understand that you've got truffles and luxury lines that can go to hotels or resorts. Aaron, what do you think you've learned through your experiences? I mean, the listener today hears that Aaron Hale is unstoppable. It sounds like whatever challenges you're faced with, you say challenge accepted. What can the listener take away that you can share from your experiences?
I found that everything is about perspective. It's having gratitude for what we still have and for the sun coming up. And life is about showing up. So if you wake up in the morning, kick off the sheets, get up early and just hit each day as though it's a new opportunity. No matter how difficult it might be, the hard times only make you stronger. And there's so much I've learned through my experiences, and I've learned more through the struggles than I have the easy times. So, in a way, I'm grateful for the hardest times of my life, because they make the good ones so much better.
Well, I hope that your emergencies are now more positive ones, because I understand that recently you're father to 2 twin boys, which is an emergency in a way, but it's a good one.
Talk about challenge accepted. My wife says she has a hard time telling them apart. But it is a blessing. It is another challenge. Of course, just one infant will throw a monkey wrench into the plan or the schedule. But having 2 means I have to sneak in those training miles wherever I can find them on the treadmill. But they light up the whole house. Everybody says they're absolutely gorgeous. I'll have to take the word for them. I know that they're just wonderful, and we are blessed to have the 2 new lives in our home.
Well, congratulations. Aaron, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I believe success is the mark you leave on the world. That is through teaching, through inspiration, through leaving a legacy. If all you've done through your life is made money, but had no impact on other lives, I don't think that's success at all. It's just the opposite. If what you've done has brought joy and value to others' lives, that's success.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal story and struggles and triumphs with us today. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where they can find you, follow you, and buy fudge and chocolates?
Of course. You can find us on all the social media outlets at E.O.D Confections. And they can read more about the story, connect with us, and buy the fudge at eodfudge.com.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Oh, thank you. This was terrific.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? For me, it was perspective. Today's episode is all about perspective, having gratitude for the things that you do have. And even if you're faced with enormous difficulty or bad situations, I love the idea of Aaron's E.O.D toolbox. I can't imagine what it's like to be deaf and blind. Aaron's resilience and mindset that refuse to let the self-pity last very long is a great lesson for all of us. In case you were wondering, Aaron was able to get cochlear implants that allows him to hear. His hearing is not as good as before, and he does not hear like you and me, but technology is incredible. He showed me how his cochlear implants have a Bluetooth feature that transmitted my audio directly to his ears so that we could talk over Skype. I hope that you enjoyed today's show, and thank you for joining me on this mission. I hope to see you in the Inspired Moneymakers Facebook group. If you're not there yet, join us at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Until next time, make your money matter. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.